You are nothing but a pathetic charity case. We are terminating you effective immediately, and security will escort you out right now." My sister-in-law's shrill voice echoed across the crowded marble lobby of my family's corporate headquarters, making dozens of employees stop and stare. It was 8:45 in the morning on my very first day as a low-level data entry clerk. She sneered at my clothes, reveling in her power trip, completely unaware that I was not there to collect a paycheck. I calmly unclipped my temporary visitor badge, handed it to her, and smiled. I told her to tell my father that the emergency board meeting in exactly 5 hours was going to be absolutely unforgettable. She had no idea that the anonymous billionaire savior arriving at 2:00 to bail out their bankrupt company was actually me, and I had already bought 80% of their voting shares. My name is Naomi, and I am 33 years old. Before I share exactly how I dismantled my toxic family's empire piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the pain while an arrogant family member tried to tear you down. The morning sun was streaming through the massive glass walls of Apex Solutions, casting long shadows across the imported Italian marble floors. Apex was a mid-sized logistics firm that my father Harrison had built into his personal monument. The lobby was bustling with employees rushing to catch the elevators, clutching their coffees and preparing for the workday. I had barely stepped through the revolving doors when Lexi intercepted me. Lexi was my brother Cameron's wife, a woman who wore her unearned title of Human Resources Director like a weapon. She was dressed in an overly branded designer outfit that screamed of new money and deep insecurity. Her eyes narrowed with a predatory gleam the moment she spotted me. She did not even wait for me to reach the security desk. She marched right into the center of the atrium, blocking my path. "Stop right there, Naomi," she commanded, raising her voice so that the nearest groups of employees would hear. People immediately began to slow their pace, glancing over their shoulders with thinly veiled curiosity. "Lexi," I said evenly, keeping my hands relaxed at my sides. "Good morning to you too. I am just heading up to the 4th floor to get my desk assignment." "You are not going anywhere except back out those doors," she announced, crossing her arms over her chest. "I just got off the phone with Harrison. We have decided that bringing you on board is way too much of a liability for Apex. Your father only offered you this data entry job because your mother begged him to take pity on you. But frankly, we cannot afford to carry dead weight, not even family." I stood perfectly still, letting her cruel words hang in the air. The murmurs around the lobby grew louder. I knew exactly what she was doing. This was a public execution designed to put the family disappointment back in her place. For years, they had spun a narrative that I was an utter failure because I had refused to follow my father's rigid, misogynistic corporate path. I had moved away, lived quietly, and built my own venture capital firm from the ground up. Because I never flaunted my wealth or begged for their approval, they naturally assumed I was destitute. Lexi took a step closer, looking me up and down with exaggerated disgust. "I mean, look at you," she scoffed, gesturing toward my outfit. I was wearing a bespoke, unbranded charcoal suit that cost more than her entire wardrobe, but she lacked the refinement to recognize quiet luxury. "You show up on your first day, looking like you bought your clothes at a thrift store. Did you really think you could just waltz into a professional corporate environment after squandering your life on those stupid startup fantasies? Cameron warned me you would be a disaster, but I did not think you would embarrass us before 9. "I assure you, Lexi, I am dressed perfectly for the business I am conducting today," I replied, my voice calm and completely devoid of the panic she was so desperately trying to provoke. Her face flushed with hot irritation at my lack of tears. She had fully expected me to crumble to beg for the minimum wage job, to ask her to call my father and plead on my behalf. When I did none of those things, her voice grew louder and significantly harsher. "Do not talk back to me in my lobby," she snapped. "Cameron has been working 18-hour days to keep this company afloat. He is a brilliant chief operating officer, and he does not have time to hold his little sister's hand while she pretends to be a working professional. You threw your life away, Naomi. You refused to listen to Harrison. You wasted whatever money you had. And now you expect us to clean up your mess. Well, the charity stops today. We are terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out. She snapped her fingers toward two large security guards standing near the reception desk. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, but dutifully began walking toward us. The humiliation was supposed to break me right there on the polished marble floor. My family had always used public shame to enforce obedience, a toxic tactic spearheaded by my father and perfected by his golden child, Cameron. But I was not the scared 20-year-old girl they remembered. I felt no urge to defend myself, or explain that my so-called stupid startup fantasies had evolved into a massive private equity firm. I felt no need to tell her that Cameron was not a brilliant executive, but a corrupt thief who had embezzled millions to fund his sports cars and luxury vacations, driving Apex Solutions into catastrophic debt. They were drowning, and they thought kicking me off the boat would somehow save them. I reached up and calmly unclipped the temporary paper visitor badge from my lapel. I held it out to her. Lexi snatched it from my hand, a victorious smirk plastered across her face. "Smart girl," she sneered. "Now turn around and walk out before I have them physically throw you out." I looked her dead in the eyes, my expression entirely unreadable. "I want to do this right, Lexi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a cold, terrifying authority. "Tell your father-in-law that the board meeting in exactly 5 hours should be highly interesting. I highly recommend you and Cameron attend. It will be the most important meeting of your entire lives." Lexi scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "You are completely delusional. That board meeting is for executive leadership and our new investors. It has nothing to do with a fired data entry clerk." "Just deliver the message," I said smoothly. I turned on my heel and walked toward the revolving doors. I did not look back. I did not rush. I walked with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who owned the very ground they were stepping on. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I bypassed the crowded bus stop that my family assumed I would be using. Instead, I walked straight to the curb where a sleek armored black Maybach was waiting idly. The uniformed driver immediately stepped out, opening the rear door for me with a respectful nod. I slid into the plush leather interior, the heavy door shutting solidly behind me, instantly silencing the noise of the city street. I reached into my designer handbag, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I knew by heart. My lead corporate attorney answered on the first ring. "Mitchell," I said, leaning back against the luxurious headrest. "Lexi just played her part perfectly in the lobby. I am officially terminated from Apex Solutions." "Excellent," Mitchell replied, his voice practically humming with predatory legal efficiency. "I assume we are a go for Phase 2. "We are an absolute go," I instructed coldly. "Begin the assets freeze on Apex Solutions immediately. Lock down their corporate accounts and notify the bank that the majority shareholder is invoking the debt covenants. I do not want to leave Harrison or Cameron a single cent to maneuver with before 2-0. Consider it done, Naomi. They will not even be able to buy a cup of coffee with company funds by noon." I ended the call and looked out the tinted window. As the Maybach glided away from the building, my family thought they had just disposed of their biggest embarrassment. They had absolutely no clue they had just finalized their own absolute destruction. My phone began to vibrate against the leather seat, a relentless, angry buzzing that signaled the beginning of the digital assault. I glanced down at the screen. The notifications were flooding in from the family group chat, ironically titled Apex Legacy. My father Harrison was the first to strike. His message was a wall of capitalized letters and fury. "Naomi, what on earth is wrong with you? Lexi just called me practically in tears. You caused a massive scene in the main atrium and forced her to call corporate security on your very first day. You are an absolute disgrace to this family. We try to throw you a lifeline and you publicly humiliate us." Before I could even process the sheer absurdity of Lexi claiming to be in tears, a second message popped up. This one was from my mother, Catherine. "I literally begged your father to give you this data entry job, Naomi. We opened our doors to you. We gave you a chance to finally do some honest work after your ridiculous entrepreneurial failures. And this is how you repay our generosity. Why cannot you just be compliant and grateful for once in your life? Look at your brother. Cameron has been working himself to the bone for this company. He carries the weight of the entire family on his shoulders, and you cannot even manage to walk through the front door without throwing a childish tantrum. I read the words with cold clinical detachment. Years ago, texts like these would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety and self-doubt. I would have drafted a dozen apologies, desperately trying to explain my side of the story, begging them to understand that Lexi had ambushed me. But the gaslighting was so incredibly textbook now that it bordered on boring. It was the same script they had been reading from since I was a teenager. I stared at Catherine's praise for Cameron, remembering exactly how my brother had earned his reputation as the family genius. When I was 22, I had spent 6 months researching and drafting a comprehensive digital expansion strategy for Apex Solutions. I had proudly brought the binder to Harrison's home office, outlining how the company could cut costs by 30%. Harrison had chuckled, patted me on the shoulder, and told me to leave the heavy lifting to the men. He suggested I focus on finding a suitable husband instead. 2 months later, Cameron presented that exact same binder at a Sunday family dinner. He had simply swapped my name for his on the title page. Harrison had treated Cameron to an extravagant steak dinner, praising his visionary mind, and promoted him to vice president of strategy. The very next day, Catherine had purchased Cameron a $30,000 watch to celebrate his brilliance. When I tried to speak up when I cried and pointed out that it was my work, Catherine had pulled me into the kitchen and pinched my arm hard. She told me I was being hysterical and bitter. She hissed that a good sister supports her brother's success instead of trying to steal his spotlight. They had convinced everyone that I was a jealous, unstable failure. They repeated the lie so often that they actually believed it themselves. I locked my phone screen, letting it go dark. I would not reply. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to defend myself so they could twist my words and play the victims. I was going to give them nothing but absolute silence. A few minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time it was an incoming call, not a text. The name on the screen made me sit up slightly straighter. It was Elijah, was my sister Brittany's husband. He was a brilliant, hard-working African-American man with a master's degree in supply chain logistics. He was also the only person in the entire extended family who possessed an ounce of integrity. Naturally, my family treated him appallingly. Harrison constantly undermined Elijah's operational plans at Apex, intentionally passing over his data-driven strategies to implement Cameron's disastrous, expensive ideas. Catherine frequently made passive-aggressive comments about Elijah's background, treating him as an outsider who should be grateful they allowed him to marry Brittany. I answered the call. "Hello, Elijah. Naomi, are you okay?" His voice was hushed and urgent, echoing slightly, as if you were hiding in one of the concrete stairwells. I just saw the whole thing go down in the lobby. I saw Lexi confront you. I know you did not cause a scene. I was watching from the mezzanine balcony. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. Elijah had always been observant. He was the only person who consistently remembered my birthday. He was the only one who would casually bring me a plate of food at family barbecues. When Catherine deliberately forgot to set a place for me at the main table. "I am perfectly fine, Elijah," I said, my voice steady and warm. "I appreciate you checking on me. I really do." Lexi is parading around the Human Resources Department, acting like she just survived a hostage situation. Elijah continued, his voice dropping even lower. "But that is not why I am calling. Something really bad is happening up on the executive floor. Cameron has been shredding documents and physically destroying hard drives in his office all morning. He looks like a cornered animal. Harrison is sweating bullets about this too. 00 board meeting with the new investors. I think the company is going under, Naomi. I think they brought you in to pin something on you. They cannot pin anything on me if I do not work there." I replied smoothly. "And Elijah, you are right. The company is in critical condition. Cameron has been cooking the books for years, and Harrison has been signing off on it." I knew it. Elijah breathed a mixture of validation and dread in his tone. "I warned Harrison about the missing capital expenditure 6 months ago, and he threatened to fire me. Listen to me very carefully, Elijah. I said, my tone shifting to absolute authority. I want you to go back to your office right now. Do not wait for your lunch break. Do not draw attention to yourself. I want you to quietly pack up all of your personal belongings, your photos, your degrees, your coffee mug. Put everything in your car and then leave the building. Take the rest of the day off. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Elijah was smart enough to recognize a genuine warning when he heard one. Naomi, what exactly is going to happen at 2? He asked quietly. Justice, I answered. Just pack your things, Elijah. You are the only decent person in that building, and I do not want you caught in the crossfire when the walls come crashing down. I ended the call with Elijah and let my phone drop into my lap. The heavy silence of the armored vehicle wrapped around me. Once again, the smooth hum of the engine, a stark contrast to the absolute chaos I knew was currently unfolding inside the Apex Solutions headquarters. As my driver navigated the crowded city streets, I pulled a secured tablet from my leather briefcase and opened the master financial file. The irony of the entire situation was almost physically palpable. Just 3 weeks ago, my father had summoned me to a formal family dinner. He had put on a pathetic display of parental magnanimity, telling me that despite my ongoing failures to launch a successful career, the family was willing to throw me a lifeline. He had offered me a data entry position that paid barely above minimum wage. He framed it as a profound charity case, a generous favor from a loving father to a deeply misguided daughter. The reality staring back at me from the glowing screen of my tablet was vastly different. Apex Solutions was bleeding cash at an unprecedented catastrophic rate. Cameron had driven their operating margins into the ground with disastrous logistical contracts and massive ego-driven marketing campaigns that yielded zero return on investment. The company was drowning in defaulted loans, desperately fighting off aggressive creditors daily. Harrison thought he was playing a brilliant game of corporate chess. He firmly believed that today, at exactly 2 in the afternoon, a mysterious billionaire savior from a massive private equity conglomerate was arriving to bail them out. He had spent the last month practically groveling to my firm's representatives through third-party, ego-driven marketing campaigns that yielded zero return on investment. The company was drowning in defaulted loans, desperately fighting off aggressive creditors daily. Harrison thought he was playing a brilliant game of corporate chess. He firmly believed that today, at exactly 2 in the afternoon, a mysterious billionaire savior from a massive private equity conglomerate was arriving to bail them out. He had spent the last month practically groveling to my firm's representatives through third-party intermediaries, promising them the moon and the stars if they would just inject enough capital to save his crumbling legacy. He had absolutely no idea that the conglomerate buying out his defaulting debt was entirely owned by me. I had spent the last 12 months quietly acquiring every single piece of toxic debt Apex Solutions had generated. My firm had purchased their outstanding loans for pennies on the dollar through various shell companies and subsidiary funds. Today was not a friendly bailout. It was a hostile, merciless debt-to-equity swap. By 2 exactly, my firm would legally convert that mountain of debt into a controlling 80% stake in Apex Solutions. The family thought they were keeping their empire. In reality, they had already lost it, and I was simply arriving to hand them their eviction notices. The Maybach glided to a smooth halt in front of a soaring ultramodern high-rise in the city's most exclusive district. The doorman, recognizing the vehicle, immediately stepped forward to open the heavy glass door, greeting me with a deeply respectful nod. I bypassed the main lobby and took the private elevator directly to the top floor. The doors slid open silently, revealing my hidden sanctuary. It was a sprawling $12 million penthouse with panoramic views of the skyline, custom imported furniture, and museum-quality ultramodern high-rise in the city's most exclusive district. The doorman, recognizing the vehicle, immediately stepped forward to open the heavy glass door, greeting me with a deeply respectful nod. I bypassed the main lobby and took the private elevator directly to the top floor. The door slid open silently, revealing my hidden sanctuary. It was a sprawling $12 million penthouse with panoramic views of the skyline, custom imported furniture, and museum-quality art. It was a pristine world completely separate from the toxic grip of my family. Nobody in the Apex Circle knew this place existed. Not my parents, not Cameron, not Lexi. The only person who had access to this sanctuary was Todd, my boyfriend of 2 years. I had always believed Todd was my safe harbor. When I returned home exhausted from ruthlessly building my firm, he was the one pouring the wine and listening to my frustrations. I walked across the plush carpet, the thick material absorbing the sound of my footsteps completely. I expected to find Todd in the kitchen, making his morning coffee, but the room was empty. A low voice drifted down the hallway from my private study. I approached quietly, assuming he was on a work call, but as I drew closer, the specific cadence of his voice and the name he spoke made my blood run instantly cold. Todd was sitting in my leather desk chair, his back to the open door, speaking animatedly into his phone. "Yes, Cameron, I am telling you, you have absolutely nothing to worry about," Todd was saying, a sickeningly ingratiating tone dripping from his voice. "Naomi is completely oblivious. She left for the office early this morning, thinking she was actually going to be doing data entry. She genuinely believes your father is trying to help her out. I have been telling her all week how lucky she is to finally have a stable job." He paused, listening to my brother on the other end of the line. I know. Todd chuckled, a cruel, mocking sound that sent a shockwave of absolute disgust through my chest. "She is delusional. She keeps rambling about her little startup investments, but I have kept her totally distracted just like we agreed. She is manageable. Now, regarding that vice president of business development position we discussed. You promised me the title and the 6-figure salary would be finalized before the end of the quarter. I am doing my part, Cameron. I am keeping the family embarrassment out of your hair." I stood frozen in this doorway, staring at the back of the man I thought I loved. The betrayal was so absolute, so meticulously calculated that it temporarily stole the breath from my lungs. Todd was not my safe harbor. He was a spy, a paid informant planted in my life by my own brother. He was leaking my daily schedule, my private conversations, and my emotional state directly to the family that despised me, all to secure a prestigious job title at a company that was secretly bankrupt. He had sold my trust to advance his own pathetic career. I took a single step into the study. The sound of my designer heel, clicking against the hardwood floor, was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Todd whipped around, his eyes widening in sheer, absolute panic as he realized I was standing in the doorway. I stepped back into the sprawling marble hallway of my penthouse, leaving Todd to stew in his own terror for a moment. I glanced at the glowing screen. The name flashing was Elijah. Elijah was my brother-in-law, married to my superficial status-obsessed sister Brittany. More importantly, Elijah was an exceptionally brilliant African-American man, holding a master's degree in supply chain logistics from a top-tier university. He was the operations manager at Apex Solutions, a title that grossly underestimated his actual intellectual capacity and his daily contributions to the firm. My family, completely blinded by their own deep-seated prejudices and blatant nepotism, constantly undermined him. Harrison and Cameron treated him as a glorified assistant, intentionally dismissing his data-driven strategies simply because he did not fit their narrow, bigoted view of what a corporate leader should look like. They marginalized him at every family dinner, and they ignored his operational warnings in every board meeting. Brittany was no better, treating her husband as a mere accessory rather than an equal partner. Despite being the smartest man in any room, he walked into Elijah was suffocated by my family's toxic culture. Yet, he was the only person connected to the Apex bloodline who had ever treated me with genuine, unadulterated respect. I pressed the answer button and brought the phone to my ear, keeping my eyes locked on the study door where Todd was trapped. "Hello, Elijah," I said, my voice completely stripped of the rage that was currently burning through my veins regarding Todd's betrayal. "Naomi, are you okay?" Elijah asked immediately. His voice was hushed, carrying a slight echo that suggested he was speaking from a secure location, likely one of the concrete stairwells at the Apex headquarters. The genuine concern in his tone was a sharp contrast to the deceit I had just uncovered in my own home. I saw the entire thing go down in the lobby this morning. I was walking across the mezzanine balcony when Lexi cornered you. I am perfectly fine, Elijah, I replied smoothly, leaning against the cool wall of the hallway. It was exactly the kind of theatrical performance I expected from her. It was a complete setup, Elijah continued, his voice tight, with suppressed frustration. Lexi had security positioned near the elevators before you even walked through the front revolving doors. She orchestrated the entire public shaming to make a point. I wanted to come down there and intervene, Naomi. I really did. But Harrison has been breathing down my neck all week, threatening to terminate my department's funding if I step out of line. I would never want you to risk your position to defend me, I assured him, feeling a surge of profound appreciation for the lone supporter I had in that wretched building. Lex's little power trip is the least of my concerns today. That is actually why I'm calling you privately. Elijah said, his tone shifting from personal concern to sharp, urgent professionalism. Lex's stunt in the lobby is just a distraction. Something massive and incredibly dangerous is happening on the executive floor right now. I have been running independent audits on the supply chain accounts for the past 3 months because the vendor invoices were not matching our delivery manifests. I listened intently, allowing the silence to encourage him to continue. Cameron has been cooking the books, Naomi. Elijah revealed the heavy weight of the secret evident in his hushed whisper. He has been funneling millions of dollars through phantom logistics vendors. We are paying for massive freight shipments that simply do not exist. The money is being routed to offshore holding accounts. When I tried to bring the discrepancy to Harrison's attention last week, he completely shut me down and told me I was overstepping my bounds. But this morning, Cameron is in full panic mode. He is physically shredding documents in his suite. He is destroying hard drives. They are desperately trying to hide the financial bleeding before the Tule board meeting with the new investors. A cold, satisfied smile touched my lips. Elijah was sharp enough to catch the massive fraud that Harrison was desperately trying to bury. My brother-in-law was a phenomenal asset, entirely wasted on a family of corrupt fools who were too arrogant to utilize his talents. You are incredibly thorough, Elijah, I said, validating his brilliant investigative work. Your operational audits are flawlessly accurate. Cameron has indeed been embezzling corporate funds to support his luxury lifestyle, and Harrison has been fraudulently signing off on the quarterly reports to protect his golden child. They have effectively bankrupted Apex Solutions. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. You know about the phantom accounts, Naomi. If the new investors discover this during the buyout meeting this afternoon, Harrison and Cameron are going to face federal indictment. The entire company is going to implode today. Elijah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I instructed, my voice dropping to a register of absolute commanding authority. I value your integrity, and I value your mind. You are the only person in that building who actually understands how the company operates. Because of that, I am giving you a direct warning. A warning? He repeated, confusion mingling with realization. I want you to leave that stairwell, walk directly to your office and pack up your personal belongings, I told him clearly. Take your framed degrees, your photographs, and anything else you care about. Put them in your car and leave the Apex premises before 2. Do not tell Brittany. Do not warn Harrison. Just quietly remove yourself from the blast radius. The silence that followed was thick with dawning comprehension. Elijah was a brilliant man. He did not need me to spell out the exact details to understand that a catastrophic shift in power was imminent. He realized in that profound moment that the sister-in-law everyone dismissed as a failure was holding the detonator to the entire corporate empire. Understood, Elijah said quietly, asking no further questions. I am packing my things right now. Take care of yourself, Naomi. You too, Elijah, I replied. I will be in touch very soon. I ended the call and slipped the phone into my tailored pocket. The confirmation of Cameron's frantic document shredding was the perfect validation of my impending strike. The Apex empire was already burning from the inside out. I turned my attention back to the study door, my expression hardening into a mask of pure ice. Elijah was safe. Now it was time to deal with the traitor standing in my home. I stepped back into the doorway, locking eyes with Todd, ready to systematically dismantle the man who thought he could sell me out to my own family. Todd's hand shook violently as he scrambled to press the end call button on his smartphone. The device slipped from his sweaty fingers, clattering loudly onto the polished mahogany desk. For a man who had just spent the last 10 minutes confidently negotiating his corporate future with my brother, he currently looked like a terrified child caught stealing from a cash register. His chest heaved as he tried to drag air into his lungs, his eyes darting frantically around my private study, as if searching for a hidden exit. There was none. He was trapped in the very sanctuary he had chosen to defile. This penthouse was supposed to be my absolute refuge. I had purchased this sprawling property entirely in cash, placing it under a blind trust to ensure my family could never trace my residence. It was a fortress designed to keep their relentless toxicity at bay. When I invited Todd to move in with me 6 months ago, I believed I was opening my safe haven to a partner who respected my boundaries. I had given him the access codes, the security clearances, and my complete trust. I had allowed him to share the one space in the world where I did not have to wear armor. Instead, I had willingly invited a parasite into my home. As I stood there watching his pathetic display of panic, the pieces of the past few months rapidly locked into place with blinding clarity. The sudden, uncharacteristic phone calls from Catherine, demanding to know where I was on specific weekends. Harrison somehow knowing exactly which coffee shop I frequented on Tuesday mornings, Cameron making snide, highly specific remarks about my supposed financial struggles during our rare family encounters. They had not been guessing. They had not been lucky. They had a direct informant sleeping in my bed. Todd swallowed hard, forcing a sickeningly artificial smile onto his face. He held his hands up in a placating gesture, taking a cautious step toward me. "Naomi, sweetheart," he stammered, his voice pitching an octave higher than normal. "It is not what you think. I know how that sounded, but you have to understand." Cameron called me out of nowhere. He was just asking questions about how you were adjusting to the new data entry job. I was just humoring him to keep the peace. You know how your family gets when they feel ignored. I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I simply crossed my arms and stared at him with absolute freezing contempt. Humoring him, I repeated softly. The words hung in the silence of the study, heavy and dangerous. You were humoring my brother by explicitly telling him that I was completely oblivious. You were humoring him by promising to keep me manageable and distracted. You were humoring him by demanding a 6-figure vice president title at Apex Solutions in exchange for your continued espionage services. Todd physically recoiled as I recited his exact phrases back to him. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and pale. He realized instantly that I had not just caught the end of his conversation. I had heard the entire transaction. I had heard him negotiate the price of my privacy. "They are your family, Naomi," Todd blurted out, shifting his strategy from denial to desperate justification. His tone took on that familiar condescending edge he always used when he thought I was being too emotional. "They were genuinely worried about you. Harrison reached out to me months ago. He said you were living in a fantasy world, pretending to be some big-shot investor, while secretly going broke. He told me you needed an intervention before you ruined your life completely. I was only trying to protect you." The absolute audacity of his gaslighting was staggering. He was actually trying to convince me that selling my daily schedule to my abusive father and corrupt brother was an act of profound romantic protection. He honestly believed he was the rational savior, managing a delusional woman. "You thought you were protecting me by brokering a backroom deal for a corporate title." I stated, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "You decided that my boundaries were irrelevant. You took the security of this home, the trust I placed in you, and you monetized it. You sold my emotional state to Cameron so he could feel superior while his own company burned to the ground. I did it for us." Todd snapped, his fear morphing into defensive anger. "You refuse to communicate with them. You isolate yourself in this massive apartment, hiding from the real world. Harrison offered me a genuine opportunity at Apex Solutions. He offered me a chance to build a real future for us, because you clearly cannot handle your own family. I stepped up to be the man in this relationship. I secured a vice president position, so we would not have to worry about money when your little startup ventures finally fail. The knife twist of his betrayal was not just the act of spying itself. It was the sheer breathtaking arrogance behind it. Todd truly believed I was weak. He believed the narrative my family had spun. He looked around my $12 million penthouse, drank my imported wine, slept in my custom bed, and somehow convinced himself that I was a financial failure who desperately needed his mediocre corporate intervention. I was willing to sacrifice my sanity and my safety just to secure a shiny new title on his resume. You secured nothing, I told him, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. You are not a corporate strategist. You are a cheap informant who just negotiated a job at a company that is currently defaulting on every major loan it possesses. You sold your loyalty to a sinking ship, Todd. And you sold out the only person who actually provided you with a life of luxury. Todd scoffed, crossing his arms, trying to regain some semblance of masculine authority. You are just being hysterical, because your pride is hurt. Apex Solutions is a massive logistics firm. Harrison told me about the billionaire investor coming in today to expand their operations. They are about to double their market share. You have absolutely no idea how business works, Naomi. You are just angry because they offered me a seat at the executive table while you are stuck doing data entry. I looked at the man I had trusted, marveling at his absolute ignorance. He was standing in the center of my empire, entirely blind to the power I held. He had chosen to align himself with my abusers, betting his entire future on their fabricated wealth. He had handed them the knife and pointed it directly at my back. I did not feel heartbreak. I did not feel the urge to cry over a lost relationship. I felt an overwhelming icy clarity. The betrayal was complete. My family had poisoned my sanctuary, and Todd had been their willing accomplice. It was time to show him exactly whose table he had just begged to sit at. I did not raise my voice or step closer. I simply held his gaze with a cold, terrifying calm that made his bravado completely disintegrate. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, until the sheer weight of it forced him to speak again. You are acting completely unhinged right now, Naomi, Todd scoffed, running a nervous hand through his hair. He shifted his weight, trying to physically dominate the space by puffing out his chest. This is exactly what Harrison was warning me about. You get paranoid and push people away the second they try to intervene. You are completely out of touch with reality. I remained perfectly still. I let him dig his own grave, watching him deploy the exact same manipulative tactics my mother had used for decades. It was fascinating in a clinical sort of way to see how easily my family had infected his mind with their toxic narrative. Look at yourself, he continued, emboldened by my silence. You cannot even manage your own basic finances without going into the red. You have been playing businesswoman for years, chasing these ridiculous startup dreams, and you have absolutely nothing to show for it. Someone had to step up. I am securing our future because you clearly cannot do it yourself. I took another step toward me, adopting a tone of faux sympathy that made my skin crawl. I am doing the hard work here. I am managing your family's expectations. I am dealing with Cameron and Harrison, so you do not have to. They gave you a job today because they know you are financially incompetent. If I had not brokered this deal, if I had not kept them informed about your erratic behavior, you would be stuck doing data entry for the rest of your life. You should be thanking me. Thanking you. I repeated, my voice devoid of any warmth. You genuinely believe you are the master strategist here. You think you are securing our future by acting as a paid informant for a man who embezzles from his own company. Stop being so incredibly dramatic. Todd snapped, his frustration boiling over. You do not understand basic corporate dynamics. Harrison is a titan in this city. Apex Solutions is about to receive a massive influx of capital from a major private equity firm. They are bringing in a billionaire investor this afternoon. I secured a spot on the winning team. I am making sure we have a safety net when your little business ventures completely fail. You are just too stubborn and proud to admit that you need my help to survive in the real world. His words were a perfect sickening echo of my father's arrogance. Todd had swallowed their lies completely. He genuinely thought I was a fragile, incompetent woman who needed a man to secure her financial stability. He thought my absolute silence was a sign of submission. He had no idea it was the calm before the execution. I reached into my designer handbag and pulled out my secured tablet. I did not waste my breath arguing against his pathetic delusions. I simply tapped the screen a few times, accessing the encrypted files I used to manage my personal real estate portfolio. I walked over to the mahogany desk, stood right next to him, and placed the glowing tablet directly in his line of sight. "Read the highlighted document," I commanded my voice, slicing through the thick tension in the room. Todd scoffed, rolling his eyes as if I were forcing him to look at a child's finger painting. But as his gaze dropped to the high-resolution screen, his arrogant smirk instantly froze. He blinked, leaning in closer, his eyes scanning the dense legal text of the property deed. He read the purchase price first, $12 million paid entirely in cash. Then his eyes darted to the top of the document, where the name of the sole exclusive owner was printed in bold, undeniable letters, my name. The tablet slipped from his fingers and hit the desk with a sharp clack. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The absolute magnitude of his miscalculation was finally crashing down on him. He had spent months living in a $12 million fortress, drinking my imported wine and sleeping in my custom bed, all while convincing himself he was the primary provider for a failing artist. "You own this entire penthouse," Todd whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "I own many things, Todd," I replied smoothly, crossing my arms and looking down at him with absolute disdain. "What fascinates me most is not that you chose to betray me. It is how incredibly cheap you were when you sold your loyalty. You traded your integrity for a vice president title at Apex Solutions, a company that has not turned a profit in 4 years. You allied yourself with Harrison and Cameron, 2 men who have embezzled their own legacy into the ground. They are currently drowning in over $60 million of defaulted loans." Todd shook his head frantically, backing away from the desk. "No," Harrison said, "they have an investor. He said a billionaire is coming today to finalize a massive capital injection." "And did you honestly think a corporate titan would rely on a data entry clerk's insecure boyfriend for strategic espionage?" I asked, dissecting his foolishness piece by piece. "Harrison fed you a fantasy to keep you compliant. You thought you were stepping up to be the man of the house, saving the hysterical woman from financial ruin. In reality, you were nothing but a cheap pawn, easily manipulated by a failing CEO who needed someone naive enough to believe his lies. You sold out the only person who actually provided you with a life of absolute luxury, and you did it for a temporary desk on a rapidly sinking ship." I did not wait for his pathetic response. I reached under the lip of the mahogany desk and pressed my thumb against a concealed biometric sensor. A subtle chime echoed through the room, followed immediately by a steady red light, blinking on the security panel mounted near the door. The private security team for this building was comprised entirely of former military personnel. They were highly compensated specifically for their speed, their absolute discretion, and their unquestioning loyalty to the building's owners. Todd stared at the blinking red light, his chest heaving as the reality of his situation continued to crash down around him. He took a hesitant step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Naomi, please," he begged, his voice trembling so violently it cracked. "We can talk about this. I was stupid. I was completely manipulated by your father. Harrison made it sound like you were in desperate trouble, and I just wanted to help you. I love you." I looked at my Patrick Phipe watch, noting the precise position of the second hand. "You have exactly 3 minutes," I said, my voice cutting through his desperate pleas. "You may take one single bag from the master bedroom closet. You will only pack the items you brought with you when you moved in 6 months ago. Any clothing, watches, or accessories purchased with my money will remain here. If you attempt to take anything that belongs to me, my security team will detain you for grand larceny. 3 minutes." Todd choked out, his eyes wide with disbelief. Naomi, be reasonable. All my things are here. My entire life is here. 2 minutes and 45 seconds, I replied smoothly, not breaking eye contact. If you are not standing at the front door with your single bag when the security team arrives, you will leave with nothing but the clothes currently on your back. Anything left behind will be incinerated by the evening staff. The sheer terror finally overrode his shock. Todd spun around and sprinted down the hallway toward the master suite, his dress shoes slipping frantically against the polished marble floor. I listened to the chaotic sounds of his panic echoing from down the hall, drawers being ripped open, hangers clattering to the hardwood floor, zippers tearing in a desperate rush. He was frantically trying to salvage whatever miserable remnants of his life he could fit into a single duffel bag. I remained standing in the study, utterly motionless. I did not feel a single ounce of pity for the man tearing his life apart in the next room. Todd had made a calculated decision to align himself with my abusers. He had weighed my value against a promised corporate title and decided I was expendable. He had simply bet on the wrong horse, and now he was paying the absolute price for his profound stupidity. Exactly 2 minutes and 50 seconds later, the heavy oak double doors of my penthouse swung open. 2 towering security operatives stepped into the entryway, their dark suits immaculately tailored, their expressions completely neutral. They moved with silent practice efficiency, flanking the doorway and waiting for my command. Todd stumbled out of the master suite hallway, gasping for breath, clutching a cheap canvas gym bag to his chest. His designer tie was skewed, his hair disheveled, sweat pouring down his face. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the 2 massive guards blocking the exit. He looked past them to me, his eyes brimming with genuine, unadulterated fear. "Naomi," he pleaded one last time, his voice dropping to a pathetic whine. He dropped to his knees right there on the expensive rug, his hands clasped together. "Do not do this. I have nowhere to go. I quit my consulting job because Harrison promised me the vice president role today. I do not have an apartment. I do not have a car. Please, just give me another chance. I will do anything." I walked slowly out of the study and stood a few feet away from where he was kneeling. I looked down at him, observing the miserable, groveling creature he truly was. "Harrison is going to be fired for financial fraud at Unclipped today," I stated coldly. "Apex Solutions will cease to exist in its current form by sunset. You traded your career for a phantom position at a bankrupt company. Escort him out," I commanded, shifting my gaze to the security operatives. "If he ever attempts to enter this building again, or if he attempts to contact me through any channel, you are authorized to use whatever force necessary to remove the threat." The guards moved instantly. They grabbed Todd by his upper arms, hauling him to his feet with effortless strength. He thrashed weakly against their grip, but it was entirely useless. They dragged him backward toward the open doors. "You cannot do this to me," Todd screamed, his voice echoing shrilly in the corridor as they pulled him over the threshold. "I was trying to save you. You are making a massive mistake." I did not answer. I simply pressed the automated panel on the wall, and the heavy oak doors swung shut, cutting off his pathetic shouting with a solid, definitive thud. The electronic locks engaged with a heavy click. I was finally completely alone. The vast, luxurious penthouse was enveloped in absolute silence. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, looking out over the sprawling city skyline. The morning sunlight caught the glass of the distant corporate towers, gleaming brightly against the blue sky. I stood there and allowed the reality of the morning to fully wash over me. Within the span of a few hours, I had been publicly humiliated and fired by my arrogant sister-in-law. I had been digitally attacked and gaslighted by my own parents. I had discovered that the man sleeping in my bed was a paid informant selling my privacy for a job title. The double betrayal from both my blood relatives and my romantic partner should have shattered me. It should have sent me spiraling into the exact kind of hysterical breakdown my family always claimed I was prone to having. Instead, the betrayal acted as a forge. The intense heat of their treachery burned away any lingering traces of guilt or familial loyalty I might have secretly harbored. It solidified my resolve into unbreakable steel. They had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they viewed me as nothing more than a convenient victim to be used, abused, and discarded whenever it suited their selfish needs. They lacked even a basic shred of human decency. I checked my watch. The hands moved steadily forward, ticking closer to the appointed hour. It was time to leave this personal mess behind and step fully into the role of the apex predator. I needed to head to the secure virtual war room to finalize the legal executions with Mitchell and my forensic auditing team. The two-night board meeting was no longer just a corporate acquisition. It was going to be a total unmerciful massacre. I would not spare a single one of them. I turned away from the floor-to-ceiling windows and walked down the expansive hallway toward my master suite. The time for reflection was over. I needed to prepare for war. I stepped into my massive custom-built walk-in closet, the soft-motion sensor lights illuminating rows of designer garments. I reached up and unbuttoned the cheap, unremarkable blouse my mother had insisted I wear for my new data entry position. She had actually mailed it to me last week, with a passive-aggressive note, suggesting I try to look presentable for once. I let the fabric drop to the floor and kicked it aside. I would never wear a costume of submission for that family again. Instead, I pulled out a razor-sharp, bespoke midnight blue suit, crafted by my personal tailor in Milan. The fabric was immaculate, the cut severe and completely unapologetic. It was the armor of a woman who commanded boardrooms, not one who cowered in lobbies. I slipped into a crisp white silk shirt and fastened the tailored blazer. Feeling the immediate shift in my posture, I moved to the glass display case in the center of the room and unlocked it. Reaching for my favorite timepiece, I strapped the heavy diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe watch around my wrist. The cool metal against my skin was a grounding physical reminder of the empire I had built entirely on my own. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The vulnerable, eager-to-please daughter was completely dead. The ruthless chief executive officer was ready to take the wheel. I left the master suite and walked into my secure home office, locking the heavy soundproof door behind me. I sat down at my expansive glass desk and tapped the control panel, lowering the motorized blackout shades over the windows to ensure absolute privacy. I booted up the encrypted multi-monitor communication station and logged into the secure virtual war room my firm utilized for hostile takeovers. The screens flared to life instantly. On the primary monitor, my lead corporate attorney, Mitchell, sat at a massive conference table in our downtown headquarters. He looked impeccably sharp, surrounded by thick stacks of legal binders. On the adjacent screens, my elite team of forensic auditors were already logged in their faces, serious and focused. "Good morning, Naomi," Mitchell said, his voice crisp and strictly business. The asset freeze on Apex Solutions was executed flawlessly. Their banking accounts are completely locked, their corporate credit lines are severed, and their payroll systems are officially frozen. They are entirely paralyzed. As of 10:15 this morning, Harrison cannot even authorize the purchase of printer paper. "Excellent work, Mitchell," I replied, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the cool glass of my desk. "Now, show me the final audit reports. I want to see exactly how deep my brother managed to bury this company before he started shredding his hard drives." The lead forensic auditor, a brilliant numbers expert named David, shared his screen to the central monitor. A complex web of financial ledgers, highlighted bank transfers, and offshore routing numbers materialized in front of me. "It is significantly worse than we initially projected, Naomi," David stated, bringing up a heavily redacted internal balance sheet. "Your brother-in-law, Elijah, was completely correct about the phantom logistics vendors. But Cameron was not just padding invoices. He created an entire network of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. He authorized massive monthly payouts from the Apex operating budget to these fake companies, claiming they were essential international freight partners. We tracked the routing numbers directly to private accounts solely controlled by Cameron." I stared at the staggering numbers glaring back at me from the screen. "How much did he steal?" David gave me the exact figure. Over the past 4 years, Cameron has successfully embezzled just over $14 million from Apex Solutions. David confirmed his tone, reflecting his professional disgust, And we have the receipts for exactly where that money went. He used corporate funds to purchase 2 custom Lamborghinis, fully paid in cash. He leased a massive luxury yacht for a 6-week vacation in the Maldives last summer. Hai even used company money to purchase a $3 million vacation home in Aspen under his wife's maiden name. Lexi has been living like royalty on stolen corporate capital. My jaw tightened. Lexi had stood in the lobby just hours ago, wearing designer clothes, but with stolen money, and called me a charity case. She had mocked my supposed failures, while her husband systematically robbed his own family blind. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. "What about Harrison?" I asked, shifting my gaze back to Mitchell. "My father micromanages every single cent that moves through that building. There is absolutely no way Cameron could siphon $14 million out of the operating budget without the chief executive officer noticing the massive hole in the quarterly reports." Mitchell smiled, a cold, predatory expression that meant he had found the kill shot. He held up a thick manila folder to the camera. Harrison noticed, Mitchell confirmed. He noticed 2 years ago, but instead of reporting his son to the authorities or removing him from the company, Harrison chose to cover it up to protect his golden child. "We recovered the deleted tax returns your father filed with the federal government. Harrison personally signed off on massively inflated operational losses. He intentionally committed federal tax fraud to hide Cameron's embezzlement from the banks and the board of directors. He legally certified fraudulent documents to keep his precious son out of federal prison." The final pieces of the puzzle locked into place. Harrison had jeopardized the entire family legacy, broken federal laws, and driven a profitable company into complete bankruptcy just to protect Cameron. Yet, when I simply wanted to pursue a career in finance, Harrison told me I was not smart enough to handle real money. He had protected a thief and exiled a visionary. "This is the final nail in the coffin," Mitchell stated, tapping the folder on the table. "They committed wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and federal tax evasion. The paper trail is completely undeniable. If we hand this over to the authorities, Harrison and Cameron will face a minimum of 10 years in federal prison. We are not handing it over to the authorities just yet," I said, a dangerous calm settling over my mind. "We are going to use this to execute them in the boardroom. I want them to look at the undeniable proof of their own pathetic corruption. I want them to realize that the daughter they banished is the only reason they are not currently in handcuffs." I looked at the screens, seeing the readiness in my team's faces. The financial skeletons had been fully unearthed, and the graves were dug. My family thought they were walking into a celebration today. They were actually walking directly to their own funeral. "Prepare the termination documents," I ordered Mitchell. "We leave for the Apex building in 1 hour." Mitchell nodded, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he brought up the finalized capitalization table on my center monitor. The pie chart that appeared was a thing of absolute terrifying beauty. For decades, Harrison had ruthlessly guarded his 60% controlling interest in Apex Solutions, keeping Catherine and my older sister Brittany pacified with minor non-voting dividend shares. Cameron had been gifted a 20% voting stake the day he turned 25. I, of course, had been given absolutely nothing. Now the screen displayed a completely different reality. A massive solid wedge of deep navy blue consumed the vast majority of the chart, leaving only a microscopic sliver of gray for my family. I am Naomi, 33 years old, and I spent a decade building an empire out of the scraps my parents left me when they cut me off at 18. My spoiled sister was always treated like the star. Private schools, lavish trips, a brand new convertible at 23. But during our grandmother's 80th birthday dinner at a Michelin star restaurant, she thought she finally caught me in a lie. She slammed a real estate listing on the table, screaming that I had secretly bought a $4 million New York City penthouse, and demanded I hand over the keys to her. She thought she had me cornered, she yelled. My father dropped his fork in shock, and my aunt said something that froze my sister in her tracks. What none of them realized was that I had not just bought a penthouse. I had bought the entire commercial building where her husband worked. And I brought my corporate attorney to dinner as my +1. Before I continue this story, Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to legally destroy the people who share your DNA just to protect your peace. Trust me, you will want to stay for the moment. My African Amine brother-in-law realizes he is about to be investigated by the federal government. The crystal glasses at Leonardan clinket softly around us. The ambient noise of Manhattan's elite, humming, in the background of our private dining room. We were supposed to be celebrating Grandma Beatrix's 80th birthday, and my 28-year-old sister Madison decided it was the perfect moment to stage an ambush. Madison reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a thick stack of printed papers, and slammed it right onto the center of the white linen tablecloth. The impact knocked over a salt shaker and caused the waiter pouring water to freeze in his tracks. The papers featured a brightly colored Zillow listing, a $4.5 million penthouse in Tribeca. Madison shrieked, her voice slicing through the elegant jazz music playing overhead. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at my face, her eyes wide with a mix of fury and greed. You bought a $4.5 million penthouse in Tribeca and hid it from your own family. Are you planning to be selfish for the rest of your miserable life? My father, Richard, dropped his heavy silver fork onto his porcelain plate with a loud clatter. My mother, Catherine, gasped loudly, pressing her hand against her pearl necklace, as if the very concept of my financial success was a physical assault on her cardiovascular system. I did not flinch. I slowly picked up my wine glass, taking a measured sip of Cabernet before setting it down on the table. I did not hide it, Madison, I said, my voice deliberately calm and flat. It is a private real estate transaction. My assets are none of your business, and please lower your voice. You are embarrassing yourself in a Michelin star restaurant. Embarrassing myself? Madison scoffed, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. She wore a dress she definitely could not afford on her income as a lifestyle influencer, a career consisting mostly of posting photos of avocado toast and pretending to be rich. You are the embarrassment. Naomi, Jamal, and I are trying to start a family. We are living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that barely has enough closet space for my brand collaborations. And you, a single woman with zero prospects of ever finding a husband, are hoarding a 5,000 feet penthouse all to yourself. Catherine leaned forward, her face flushed with indignation. Your sister is absolutely right, Naomi. This is exactly why people call you cold and calculating. Madison and Jamal are trying to build a future. As the older sister, you should be stepping up to help them. You do not need all that space. You should transfer the title to Madison immediately. It is the absolute least you can do for this family after everything we have been through. I stared at my mother, letting the sheer audacity of her demand hang in the air for a long moment. Transfer the title. I repeated, a cold smile touching the corners of my mouth. Just hand over a luxury property I paid for with my own money to a sister who has never worked a 40-hour week in her life. We are family, Richard barked from the head of the table. His face was turning a dangerous shade of red. In this family, we support each other. Your sister needs a home suitable for raising children. You have more money than you need. Clearly. Stop acting like a greedy outsider and do what is right. Support each other, I echoed, resting my forearms on the table. I locked eyes with my father, refusing to back down. That is a fascinating choice of words, Dad. Does supporting each other look like the time you took $80,000 out of my college fund to buy Madison a brand new convertible for her 23rd birthday? Because as I recall, your exact words to me were that I was smart and could figure out student loans, while your golden child needed a reliable vehicle for her personal brand. Madison rolled her eyes dramatically, sighing as loudly as she could. Oh my God. Are we really bringing up the car again? That was 5 years ago. Get over it. I spent 5 years working 3 different jobs. I fired back, my tone icy. I waited tables and managed properties just to pay off the predatory interest rates on those loans while you were driving to the Hamptons. So, no, Madison, I will absolutely not be giving you my penthouse. Go get a real job and buy one for yourself now, because I am done. The silence in the private dining room was suffocating. The wait staff sensed the hostility, purposefully steering clear of our heavy oak doors. Madison sat back, Her face contorted in pure rage. She looked frantically at our parents, expecting them to leap to her defense and force me into submission. They did not disappoint her. Catherine slammed her hand onto the table, her diamond rings clinking loudly against her wine glass. You are delusional, Naomi. You have always been prone to making up these wild, vindictive stories just to play the victim. We never took money from your college fund. That money was reallocated because your sister actually had a clear vision for her future, while you were wasting time on useless entry-level jobs. We were trying to teach you financial responsibility. And look at you now. You are successful. You should be thanking us instead of throwing these petty accusations in our faces. Thanking you? I asked, leaning forward, refusing to break eye contact with my mother. You want me to thank you for kicking me out the day I turned 18, with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes. You want me to thank you for ignoring my calls when I was sleeping on a friend's couch because I could not afford rent and tuition at the same time. You claim you taught me financial responsibility. No, Mother. You taught me that my survival meant nothing if it inconvenienced your perfect image. You taught me that Madison's luxury lifestyle was a necessity, while my basic needs were a burden to be discarded. My father, Richard, leaned over his plate, his face purple with anger. He pointed his steak knife directly at me. Do not speak to your mother that way. You have carried this ridiculous grudge for 15 years, Naomi. It is completely pathetic. We made a strategic family investment in Madison. Her influencer brand required startup capital. You were entirely capable of working your way through school. Now you are hoarding millions of dollars in luxury real estate while your sister tries to build a family in a tiny apartment. You are a cold, ungrateful woman. We invite you to dinner, and you deliberately humiliate your sister. I am not humiliating anyone, I stated flatly. I am simply refusing to be extorted by people who call themselves family. You invited me here tonight specifically because Madison found that Zillow listing. You did not invite me to celebrate Grandma B. Tatrick. You invited me to orchestrate a highly coordinated shakedown. You want me to hand over a $4.5 million asset because Madison wants a better backdrop for her fake internet photos. It is not going to happen today, and it is not going to happen tomorrow. Madison shrieked, slamming both her hands on the table, hard enough to rattle the silverware. It is not just about photos. Jamal and I are building a legacy. We are the ones who will give Mom and Dad grandchildren. We are the ones carrying this family forward into the future. You are just a bitter spinster who cares more about property deeds than your own flesh and blood. You owe us this penthouse. You owe this family for raising you, feeding you, and putting a roof over your head for 18 years. I owe you absolutely nothing, I replied, my voice dropping to a deadly calm that commanded the entire room. I paid my own way. I built my own firm from the ground up. I secured my own capital. While you were taking $200,000 from Mom and Dad to fund your lavish destination wedding, I was working 80-hour weeks closing commercial real estate deals. You want a legacy, Madison? Try actually earning one instead of begging for mine like a spoiled child. That was when Jamal decided to intervene. Jamal is 31, an African-American financial analyst at a mid-tier firm on Wall Street. He married Madison 2 years ago, clearly under the impression he was marrying into immense generational wealth. He wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit and nervously adjusted a thick gold watch on his wrist. I knew he had financed that watch on a 36-month payment plan because my firm ran a comprehensive background check on him months ago. Jamal was obsessed with projecting an image of untouchable power. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers together, trying to look deeply intimidating. He cleared his throat, attempting to project the calm authority of a seasoned executive dealing with an unruly subordinate. Listen to me very carefully, Naomi, Jamal said, his voice dropping an octave to sound commanding. You got lucky with a few residential real estate flips, but you are playing completely out of your league here. Real wealth is built on connections, high-level Wall Street connections. You do not want to make an enemy out of me or my firm. I looked at Jamal, taking in his aggressive posture and the sheer delusion radiating from every pore of his body. The temptation to laugh right in his face was almost overpowering. You are going to threaten me right now, Jamal? I asked, raising a single arched eyebrow. It is not a threat. It is a promise, Jamal countered, leaning closer across the table until I could smell his expensive cologne. I know exactly how your industry works. I know how heavily you rely on institutional backing for your commercial acquisitions. If you do not cooperate with the family today, I can make a few discreet phone calls. I can freeze your access to institutional capital by tomorrow morning. I will personally ensure no major bank in this entire city underwrites your next project. Do not test me. You are just a lucky real estate broker. I move millions of dollars before lunch. You hand over the penthouse to me and my wife, or your little company goes bankrupt by the third quarter. It is your choice. The sheer audacity of Jamal's ultimatum hung in the stale air of the private dining room. I looked at his perfectly manicured hands, at the heavy gold watch he kept flashing under the restaurant lights, and let a slow, deliberate smile stretch across my face. I did not shrink back into my chair. I did not break eye contact. Bankrupt by the third quarter, I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue as if I were analyzing a fascinating insect under a microscope. That is a highly specific timeline, Jamal. Tell me, does the compliance department at your financial firm know you are using their corporate weight to extort private citizens during family dinners? Or do they just actively encourage their analysts to commit federal blackmail between the appetizers and the main course? Jamal let out a sharp, condescending laugh, leaning back in his chair and unbuttoning his suit jacket to project total physical dominance. Compliance reports to people like me. Naomi, you clearly do not understand how this city works. I sit in boardrooms with managing directors who can buy and sell your entire property portfolio before they even finish their morning coffee. You are a small fish swimming in an ocean you do not understand. I am offering you a lifeline today. Give us the penthouse, and I will make sure your little company stays afloat. Fight me, and I will make sure you never close another commercial real estate deal in Manhattan. Madison beamed at her husband, her eyes wide with total unquestioning adoration. She reached over and squeezed his arm, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband had just confessed to attempted extortion in a public venue. You really should listen to him, Naomi Madison said, her voice dripping with fake sugary pity. Jamal handles accounts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He is an absolute shark on Wall Street. Hi is actually trying to do you a massive favor by keeping this asset transfer within the family. If you make him mad, he will crush your little real estate hobby and not even lose a single second of sleep over it. Just hand over the keys. I already have a vision board for the renovations anyway. I am thinking of knocking down the guest bedroom walls to build a walk-in closet for my brand sponsorships. A hobby, I repeated, turning my gaze from Madison to my mother. Catherine was nodding vigorously in agreement with her golden child. This is exactly what happens when you stubbornly refuse to find a capable husband to manage your affairs, Catherine lectured, pointing her crystal wine glass directly at my chest. You get completely out of your depth. You have no idea how high-level finance operates. Jamal is a certified expert in wealth management. You should be down on your knees thanking him for taking this massive property burden off your shoulders. We are giving you an easy way out, Naomi. I took another slow sip of my wine, watching them perform their synchronized illusion. My father, Richard, crossed his arms tightly across his chest, projecting the image of a deeply disappointed patriarch. The family has reached a consensus, Naomi Richard declared, speaking as if his absurd words held actual legal binding power. The penthouse belongs to Madison and Jamal now. We will have the deed transfer papers drafted first thing on Monday morning. You will sign them, and in exchange Jamal will graciously ensure your company is protected from market volatility. It is a win for everyone involved. Now, apologize to your brother-in-law for disrespecting his authority. I set my glass down, the sharp clink cutting through their fantasy. You are all suffering from a severe, highly contagious delusion, I stated flatly. You think raising your voices and throwing around corporate buzzwords makes you powerful. Jamal, you claim you can freeze my access to institutional capital by tomorrow morning. That is fascinating, because to do that, You would need to be a senior partner or a managing director with unilateral authority over commercial lending. But you are not a managing director, are you? You are a mid-tier analyst who spends his days updating spreadsheets for the people who actually hold the power. Jamal slammed his open palm onto the table, the sudden violence causing Madison to jump in her seat. His calm, arrogant facade slipped completely, revealing the desperate, aggressive man hiding underneath the expensive tailored suit. "Do not ever disrespect my rank," Jamal snarled, his voice rising in volume as he abandoned his professional tone. "You have zero idea who you are messing with. I know exactly how your firm operates, Naomi. I know you rely heavily on bridge loans and mezzanine financing to acquire those properties. I have friends at every major bank in this financial district. One phone call from me and your credit lines dry up completely. I will call in every favor I have. I will burn your business reputation to the absolute ground. You will be blacklisted from every real estate auction in the state until you are completely ruined." I watched the sweat bead on his forehead, noting the erratic pulse visible in his neck. He was pushing too hard, threatening too loudly. He was exposing his hand. "You think you hold power because you wear a suit that costs more than your monthly rent?" "Jamal," I asked, "I have dealt with actual managing partners. They do not raise their voices at dinner parties. They do not threaten women over appetizers. They execute quietly. You are loud because you are terrified." Jamal glared at me, his chest heaving. "You arrogant witch. I have insider knowledge on market shifts that your little brain cannot even comprehend. My firm manages the portfolios of politicians and tech billionaires. We control the commercial sector. I can bury your company in compliance audits. I can flag your real estate group to the IRS. I can make your life an absolute living hell until you are begging me to take this penthouse off your hands. You seem incredibly obsessed with my liquidity, Jamal," I noted calmly, tilting my head to study his frantic behavior. "For a man who supposedly moves millions before lunch, you seem awfully desperate to get your hands on my property right this very second. You are sweating. You are shouting. You are threatening to destroy my business over a family dinner. Are you absolutely sure you are not the one who desperately needs a financial bailout?" Jamal froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly under the warm restaurant lights. He looked frantically toward Richard, his aggressive posture deflating for a fraction of a second before he puffed his chest back out in a desperate show of bravado. "Richard, handle your daughter," Jamal demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "I am trying to offer her a clean, mutually beneficial exit, but my patience is completely gone. Put her in line before I take matters into my own hands and destroy her firm." Richard stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back so hard it scraped loudly against the floor. He reached down into his leather briefcase, his face twisted in absolute fury, ready to escalate this shakedown to the next level. Richard slammed a thick stack of legal documents onto the white tablecloth, right next to my wine glass. The top page bore the crest of a major commercial bank. I did not flinch, simply shifting my gaze from the papers to his red face. "This is a $2 million commercial loan guarantee," Richard announced, his voice echoing loudly in the private dining room. "Jamal is launching his own independent financial advisory firm. He needs immediate startup capital. The bank requires a hard asset for collateral. Since you have selfishly hoarded a $4.5 million property, you are going to sign this document tonight as the primary guarantor." I looked down at the documents. I did not even need to read the fine print to know how absurd this proposition was. "You want me to put up my primary residence to back a high-rises commercial loan for a man who has zero experience running his own firm?" "I have 10 years of Wall Street experience," Jamal snapped aggressively, adjusting his silk tie. "My new firm is a guaranteed success. I already have verbal commitments from high-net worth individuals. The bank just needs a signature to release the funds. You are not actually risking anything, Naomi. It is a pure formality, a technicality to satisfy the underwriters." "A formality," I repeated, letting out a sharp, humorless laugh. "If it is a pure formality, Jamal, why are you not using your own assets? Why doesn't Madison put up her assets?" "Oh wait, Madison's net worth is entirely comprised of maxed-out credit cards and gifted designer bags." "Shut up," Madison shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical frequency. You are just trying to ruin my life because you are a jealous, bitter woman. Mom, tell her to sign it. Make her sign the paper right now. Catherine reached across the table, her eyes welling with highly practiced, entirely fake tears. She placed a trembling hand over her heart. Naomi, please stop this vicious behavior immediately. Your father and I have worked our entire lives to build a legacy for this family. We cannot liquidate our retirement accounts right now because they are tied up in complex investment vehicles. You have the liquidity. You have the physical asset. If you love us, if you have any basic respect for the family that gave you life, you will pick up a pen and sign that contract. Do not destroy your sister's future over a petty grudge. You gave me life, Catherine, and then you gave me an eviction notice on my 18th birthday. I fired back, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I paid my own rent. I paid my own tuition. I built my own firm. My assets belong to my holding company, not to you, and certainly not to Jamal. Your emotional manipulation is completely useless. Richard slammed his fist on the table again, causing Grandma Beatrix's water glass to shake. You ungrateful brat, I am your father. I am the patriarch of this family. I am ordering you to sign the guarantee. If you refuse to support your sister and your brother-in-law today, you are completely cut off. You will be disowned. I will erase your name from the family trust. I will make sure every relative we have knows you abandoned your pregnant sisters when she needed you most. You will never be welcome in our home at our holidays or in our lives ever again. You sign this paper right now, or you are dead to us. The sheer lack of self-awareness was staggering. I looked at the man who had happily spent my college savings on a luxury car for his favorite daughter, now threatening to disown the daughter who had already survived without him for 15 years. Disown me? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Dad, you cannot disown someone who already walked away. You cut me off financially a decade and a half ago. I survived. I thrived. I built a multi-million-dollar real estate investment firm while you coddled Madison into a state of absolute financial dependency. Your threat means absolutely nothing to me. Jamal leaned forward, his arrogance returning in a desperate, ugly wave. You think this is a game, Naomi? You think you can just walk away from this table? The bank needs that collateral by Monday morning. If I do not get this funding, my entire business plan collapses. If my business plan collapses, I am going to make it my personal mission to ensure your firm faces intense regulatory scrutiny. I know people at the SEC. I know aggressive auditors. I will drown your LLC in so much red tape you will be begging to sign this house over to me just to make it stop. I finally reached out and pulled the contract toward me. I flipped to the second page, scanning the financial terms. The interest rate was incredibly predatory. A clear sign that whatever bank drafted this considered Jamal a massive liability. But something else caught my eye immediately. The lending institution was a secondary subsidiary, not a Tier 1 bank. This was a lender of absolute last resort. Jamal, I said, tapping the heavy paper with my manicured finger. This is a high-yield mezzanine loan from a secondary lender. Tier 1 banks rejected your application entirely, did they not? You did not go to Chase or Goldman Sachs because your credit profile is a complete disaster. You are trying to secure $2 million at an 18% interest rate, and you want to strap that ticking financial time bomb directly to my penthouse. Jamal's jaw clenched tight. Heavy sweat was visibly forming on his brow. It is a short-term bridge loan. It is strictly temporary until the client funds clear the escrow accounts. It is financial suicide, I corrected him sharply, holding his completely terrified gaze. And I am not going down with your sinking ship. Madison slammed her hands against the edge of the table, pushing herself up from her chair. Her face contorted into a mask of pure indignation. How dare you speak to my husband like that? Madison shrieked, her voice echoing off the private dining room walls. Jamal is building an empire. You are trying to tear him down because you are miserable. You sit alone in your giant apartment every night with absolutely nobody to share it with. You are insanely jealous of my life, Naomi. You are jealous that I have a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a thriving career that people actually care about. I slowly turned my head, shifting my focus away from Jamal's sweating face, to look directly at my sister. The sheer delusion radiating from her was almost fascinating to witness. A thriving career, I repeated, keeping my voice dangerously level. You consider posting photographs of avocado toast and free skincare samples to be a thriving career. I am a lifestyle influencer, Madison snapped, flipping her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder. I have brand partnerships. I have an audience. I cultivate an aesthetic that inspires hundreds of thousands of people every single day. My platform generates actual cultural value, unlike your boring real estate contracts. I am building a brand that will sustain my family for decades. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. It is funny you bring up your brand, Madison. Because when Jamal demanded that I hand over my penthouse, I naturally felt obligated to do some basic due diligence on the two people attempting to extort me. When someone asks me to assume $2 million of risk, I verify their liquidity. So, I had my corporate team run a comprehensive background check on both of you. Madison crossed her arms tightly over her chest, jutting her chin out in a display of false bravado. Go ahead. Tell everyone how successful my engagement metrics are. I have absolutely nothing to hide. Catherine nodded vigorously from across the table, eager to defend her golden child. Madison makes 6 figures easily. Naomi, she receives PR packages from top-tier designers every week. She just booked a luxury trip to the Amalfi Coast next month. Her success is highly visible to anyone who actually pays attention to modern business. You simply do not understand the digital economy. I looked at my mother with a mixture of pity and absolute disdain. The digital economy, I said, leaning back in my chair. Let us talk about Madison's digital economy. Mother, do you genuinely believe your favorite daughter earns 6 figures? Because according to the verified financial profiles my team pulled, Madison's lifestyle brand generated exactly $14,650 in gross revenue last year. The entire table froze. Richard frowned, looking from me to Madison. That is impossible, Richard argued, his voice losing some of its aggressive edge. She just bought a Chanel bag that costs more than $10,000. We see her lifestyle. She is clearly generating massive income. She is not generating income, Dad, I corrected him sharply. She is generating debt, massive, catastrophic, unrecoverable debt. Madison's face drained of all color. She dropped her arms to her sides, her false confidence completely shattering. Shut your mouth, Naomi. Madison hissed, her voice suddenly shaking. You are making things up to make me look bad in front of Grandma Beatrice. I did not even look at Grandma Beatrice, keeping my eyes locked on my sister. I am not making anything up, Madison. Your entire life is a carefully curated lie. You bought your Instagram followers using an offshore click farm. Your engagement metrics are completely artificial. And to maintain this pathetic illusion of wealth, you have been funding your lifestyle on borrowed plastic. That is a complete lie, Madison cried out, looking desperately at our parents. She is lying, Mom. She is trying to destroy my marriage. Jamal, tell them she is lying. But Jamal did not defend her. He sat frozen in his chair, staring at Madison with a look of absolute horror. He clearly believed he had married a woman with an endless trust fund. He had no idea his wife was digging a financial grave right next to his own. I am not lying, and you all know it, I stated, cutting through Madison's fake sobs. Every luxury trip, every designer outfit, every extravagant dinner you post online is funded by credit cards. You can never pay back. You want specifics? You currently owe $45,000 to American Express. You owe $60,000 to Chase Sapphire. You owe another $45,000 on a Discover card. You are sitting in a Michelin star restaurant, wearing a designer dress, while drowning in exactly $150,000 of high-interest credit card debt. You are completely insolvent, Madison, Catherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stared at Madison, her eyes wide with shock. Madison, tell me she is lying. Tell me you do not have $150,000 in debt. Madison burst into loud, theatrical tears, burying her face in her hands. You came here tonight, expecting to guilt me into handing over my penthouse so you could liquidate it and save yourselves. I said you called me selfish. You said I was ungrateful. But I am the only person at this table who actually knows the value of $1. I turned my gaze back to Jamal, whose face was slick with terrified sweat. Now, Jamal, I said softly, let us get back to your brilliant plan to destroy my real estate firm. Because I think it is time we discuss exactly why you are so desperate for a $2 million commercial loan. Jamal shifted his weight, his custom suit suddenly looking like a straitjacket. He grabbed his crystal water glass, his hands trembling so violently that water sloshed over the rim and onto the crisp white tablecloth. He swallowed hard, trying to summon back